Welcome to Kabbalah for today. The teachings I do on the Kabbalah use the Kabbalistic structure, but are based on the fundamental teachings of the Tanakh and the Talmud. I strive to demystify what is often shrouded in symbolism in order to teach these very important Jewish concepts. Before you are the 10 Sefirot. The Sefirot are attributes. Keter is a crown. Chachma is wisdom. Bina is understanding. Chesed is kindness. Gevura is strength. Tiferet is glory. Netzach is endurance. Hod is splendor. Yesod is foundation. And Malchut is kingdom. Before you is how the Sefirot are presented in the Tree of Life. You have 3 columns. The right column, the left column, and the middle column. The right column includes Chachma, Chesed, and Netzach. The left column includes Bina, Gevura, and Hod. The middle column includes Keter, Tiferet, Yesod, and Malchut. There is one Sefirah within each column that represents the whole column. The first 3 Sefirot, Keter, Chachma, and Bina, are very lofty. They apply to the spiritual world. Because they are lofty, they don't represent the basic core nature of the columns. The columns are rather represented by the next 3 Sefirot, Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet. These 3 Sefirot are represented by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You can now begin to understand how the 3 patriarchs are so important. The Mishnah in Avot in fact teaches that the world stands on 3 things: on the Torah, on service, and on kindness. The Zohar explains, the Torah is Jacob, the service is Isaac, and kindness is Abraham. What you have here is the 3 columns, the 3 things that the world stands on, that are represented by Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Chesed is kindness, represented by Abraham. Gevura is service. Service is the service of God. Gevura is fear. Fear is the fear of God, the fear of Isaac. The fear of God is to serve God by keeping His commandments. Gevura is strength. The Mishnah in Avot teaches that a strong man conquers his inclination to sin. That is Gevura, the strength to fear God and serve God by keeping His commandments. Tiferet glory is Torah. Torah is Torah spirituality. Torah spirituality is glorious, like the glory of God. The verse states that Jacob was a perfect man who dwelled in tents. The Targum explained that he dwelled in tents of study. Jacob is known as the patriarch of Torah study and being a Torah person. The verse in Micha 7:20 states, "Give truth to Jacob, kindness to Abraham." Again we see the relationship between Abraham and kindness. Truth is Torah, as we say in the prayers, the Torah of truth. The Sefirot attributes are governances, the way God governs the world. The governances also include the governed, in fact all of creation. The 3 Sefirot that head the 3 columns are 3 types of governances. You have a kind governance of Chesed, you have the governance of Gevura, which is the fear of God and the service of God to keep His commandments, and you have the governance of Torah spirituality. Each sphera in the right column is a kindness type of governance. Each sphera in the left column is a Gevura fear service type of governance. Each sphera in the middle column is a Torah spirituality type of governance. Each of the 3 governances actually has the 3 components of Chesed, Gevura, and Torah. What this generally is the Torah scroll to learn from and to guide us to Gevura, to keep the commandments, for Chesed, a good life. Each of the 3 governances has these 3 components, but they have them in a little bit of a different way with a different outcome overall. The Chesed kindness kind of governance is personal and benevolent. It is not strict with the commandments. Good people will have a good life. The relationship to the commandments is on a personal level, and that's why it's not strict. So it's a benevolent governance. that if you're a good person, you will have a good life. The Gevurah governance is obligatory. It is strict with the commandments. It is based on the relationship between man and God. Gevurah is the fear of God to keep His commandment. In this governance, righteous people will prosper, but wicked people will suffer. The Torah governance is a governance of Torah spirituality, to suffer the physical for the purpose of the spiritual, to gain eternal life. The middle column is actually different than the right column and the left column. The right column, Sefirot, are loving and giving. The left column, Sefirot, are about fear and doing. The reason why the middle column is in the middle is because it has something from the right side and something from the left side, and the two sides pull it into the middle. We are not talking about chesed, kindness, from the right side and regular gevurah from the left side. Rather, we are talking about Torah spirituality, which in of itself is from the right side because it is loving and giving like kindness. Every sefirah of the middle column has this Torah spirituality from the right side. Every sefirah of the middle column also has a gevurah from the left side, but not the regular gevurah, but a different type of gevurah. Each sefirah of the middle column has a different one, different from each other and different from the one of the left side. Tiferet has Torah spirituality and the gevurah of righteous suffering. In regular gevurah, the righteous prosper and the wicked have the gevurah of suffering. In the Tiferet Torah governance, there is the gevurah of righteousness, of being righteous in the same way of regular gevurah, but now the righteous have suffering, to suffer the physical for the purpose of the spiritual, to gain eternal life. The middle column is dualistic in this way of having two separate parts together, a Torah part of Torah spirituality and a Gevurah part, which by Tiferet is the Gevurah of righteous suffering. They work together to suffer the physical for the purpose of the spiritual. The Mishnah in Avot indeed states, "This is the way of Torah. Bread with salt you shall eat, and water in measure you shall drink, and on the ground you shall sleep, and a life of suffering you shall live, and in Torah you shall toil. And if you do this, happiness and good for you, happiness in this world and good for you in the world to come." This was Jacob, who said his years were few and bad. He suffered for spirituality. We actually have to be positive and grateful for the suffering because of what it does. And Jacob is taken to task for not properly portraying that. But this was ultimately corrected by Jacob through Joseph. And we also see that Jacob did have the proper attitude, generally, as he asked for bread to eat and clothes to wear and not for luxuries. Because the main idea of righteous suffering is to push off immediate gratification for long-term goals. And the long-term goal of Tiferet Torah is the most amazing goal of eternal life. That is what Tiferet Torah is. Torah spirituality and Gevurah righteous suffering, suffering the physical for the purpose of the spiritual. The governances actually lead to each other, and that's the whole point of having a process to lead to the main goal of Torah spirituality and eternal life. We start with kindness, where God runs the world benevolently, with a personal relationship and an easygoingness towards the commandments. It is not only the Gevurah governance that has to keep the commandments. The Chesed governance also has to keep the commandments. It's just not treated in a strict way. That is the way to start the process, with kindness, because we're not at first ready to take on the commandments on the most strict level. Kindness also has the benefit of starting with love, to both start with love and end with love. After the kindness governance, we are ready for the strict governance of Gevurah, to keep the commandments strictly. But whereas the kindness governance is all about goodness, in the Gevurah governance we start to notice something once we reach the pinnacle of this world by keeping the commandments strictly. We realize that we got to the top, but we really didn't get anywhere. That the physical world is worthless in of itself, without spirituality. This leads to the completing governance of Torah spirituality with the gevura of righteous suffering, to suffer the physical for the purpose of the spiritual and gain eternal life. We in fact say in the prayers, "Blessed is our God, who created us for his honor and separated us from the wayward, and gave us the Torah of truth, and planted within us everlasting life." Torah is honor. Tiferet is glory. Tiferet Torah is honor and glory, to glorify God with our spirituality, as God is spiritual. Torah is life and truth. We learn the Torah to get its truths, and that gives us a higher life consciousness, which is our eternal life.